This is the story of a miraculous white powder that is helping to win the war. Its name is dichlorodarphenyltrichloroethane, for short, DDT. It may one day prove our greatest weapon towards victory over an enemy more murderous even than the first. Against disease. Time was when disease conditions in other lands didn't concern us much. The Black Death, bubonic plague of India, the Orient Africa, periodically sweeping through the crowded millions, transmitted from the rat to the human by the flea. Typhus, common to nearly every densely populated city on Earth. Explosive epidemics wiping out almost entire populations. Transported by a louse. Malaria, scourge of the tropics, carried by the Anopheles mosquito. And the many filth diseases that can be borne by flies, including the red cholera. But these were all in far-off places, with strange names, and maybe, in the security of our homes and families, we shuddered at the thought that such things could happen in the 20th century. And then suddenly, they weren't in another world after all. Our own men were out there, all over the globe. And disease was as much a menace as the enemy's bullets. We learned the full import of that at the time. Of our 36,000 troops left in the last days of the town, 20,000 were out on their feet or down with malaria. The mosquito has helped the jet to bring on the air. The fly, the meat, the sound. Something new must be found to place the menace of the disease-bearing insect. To trace the place of insecticides no longer available because of the war. Through the National Research Council, this United States Department of Agriculture laboratory of Orlando, Florida, was one of the several places in which the work was centered. It was the job of this laboratory to raise the healthiest, sturdiest specimens of the common disease-bearing insects, and then to find the eggs, and could be produced in the enormous quantities needed. If possible, something that might continue to kill, for a few hours anyway, or better, a few days after application. November 16th, 1942, was the day that brought in a new insecticide sample from Switzerland. An accompanying letter gave some of the details. One feature sounded particularly interesting, if a little unbelievable. That was the claim that after a single the raw material was given a code number and stored along the toasting routine. First, an elementary test against lice. A solution of the material is placed in a beaker, and the lice are added. Yes, it kills. But of course you can't catch all the lice in the world and put them in beakers. How to apply it in powder form on the body of a volunteer. The lice are placed in a squeeze on the subject's arm. Results are as good as expected, with only a few lice surviving. Now for the other sleeve, dusted with the powder prepared from the new material. Results. Every last louse dead. A fuller test. More volunteers covering life. Where seems the underwear dusted with the new material? But how good is it against the other vicious things? The mosquito, the flea, the fly. Adaptable, readily solvent for use in solution form. Yes, kerosene, diesel oil, even fuel and crankcase oil dissolve it easily. That's promising. It's easy to get these materials in the field. An emulsion is readily prepared with both fresh and salt water. They show really remarkable protection against the common pest mosquito is excellent. Dissolved in fuel oil, a tenth of a pound per acre, is enough to kill every mosquito in the area. But it's the Anopheles mosquito that carries malaria. What about that? A little stronger dosage is needed, but it's still amazingly potent. This is a find. In dose form, it has many advantages over the old standby screen against the malaria-carrying Anopheles. And now, what if... The information that came in the letter with it about still killing weeks after the first application. In a testing chamber, just a box with a glass cover. A light spray of the material in 5% emulsion was applied. Then the scientists waited 48 hours. At the end of that time, flies were put in the box. Big, healthy flies. In 5 minutes, they were in violent convulsions. In a little while, the spray was a dirty odor. Cockroaches the next day. Sure death. And 6 days after the original spray, lice were put in. The lethal effects of the insecticide hadn't weakened an appreciable amount. And this was not the end of its fantastic strength. 14 months later, 1 year and 2 months after that original spray, without a drop being added, the new insecticide was killing lice after the clothing had been thoroughly laundered from 6 to 8 times. Weapon against the insect killer. An incredible new weapon against disease. The War Department was quick to put the new substance into use in the field under the abbreviated name DDT. But let a medical officer tell you how effective it is proved. DDT is an example of the effective ways in which all of the scientific agencies of this country have cooperated with the medical department to the armed forces. Because we're armed with DDT, we no longer fear that type of steel. This chemical affords protection to American soldiers against the mosquitoes that carry malaria, yellow fever, dengue, full of flies, and against the ever-present flies that send about it. And therefore our essential operation continue their investigations in the laboratory and in the field. We already know the miraculous results it has produced. Its full potentialities against all the insects that spread disease must be determined. I consider this amazing chemical the most valuable contribution of our wartime medical research. We experienced the effectiveness of DDT in one of the miracles of modern medical history. This was Naples, Italy, shortly after the Allied occupation. Its growing population lacked almost everything for the safeguarding of public health. Food, fuel, blankets, housing, clothing, sanitation. And refugees from all parts of Italy were swarming in. With them below us. The perfect setup for a pandemic. And then it struck. Tightest seeing weapons ever found. But for the jam civilian population, there was only life and never in history had a typhus epidemic ended before the warmth of the spring. Then DDT was brought in. Dusting the 40,000 Italians dwelling in the jam-packed air raid shelters were demolished. Finally, 23 DDT stations were set up throughout the city, and the entire remaining population was dosed. In January, when the large-scale by the middle of February, the menace of the epidemic was over. DDT had won, by not only removing the lice from dusted, but by continuing to kill long after application, preventing reinfestation. In the Pacific, DDT goes to war against malaria in a big way, by airplane. On D-Day at Molokai, we hit both enemies at the same time, the Jap and disease. Before our troops set foot on the island. The Japanese did not live long enough to enjoy the island rid of mosquitoes by DDT. Yes, today DDT is necessarily a military weapon. We're turning it out by the thousands of tons, but every ounce is needed for the war effort. When the fascist is finally beaten, though, DDT will be available to DDT. It will aid in stamping out disease around the world. And the homecoming of the healthiest army in military history will be in no small part due to DDT, our great new weapon for war today and peace tomorrow. This is the story of a miraculous white powder that is helping to win the war. Its name is dichlorotriphenyltrichloroethane, for short, DDT. It may one day prove our greatest weapon towards victory over an enemy more murderous even than death. Bubonic plague of India, the Orient of Africa, periodically sweeping through the crowded millions, transmitted from the rat to the human by the flea. Typhus, common to nearly every densely populated city on Earth. Explosive epidemics wiping out almost entire populations, transported by a louse. Malaria, scourge. But these were all in far-off places, strange names, and maybe in the security of our homes and families, we shuddered at the thought that such things could happen in the 20th century. And then certainly, they weren't in another world after all. Our own men were out there, all over the globe, and disease was as much a menace as the enemy's bullets. Of our 36,000 troops left in the last days of Bataan, 20,000 were out on their feet or down with malaria. The mosquito had helped the chap to bring on the end. The flea, the mouse, the fly could bring similar disaster wherever our men went. In anticipation of this, the nation's scientific resources had already been marshaled by the War Department to meet the challenge. Something new must have developed in agriculture laboratory of Orlando, Florida, was one of the several places in which the work was headed. It was the job of this laboratory to raise the healthiest, sturdiest specimens of the common disease-bearing insects, and then to find the means of killing them. Hundreds of insecticides were tried out here, developed from materials sent in from all parts of the world. Some were fairly effective, even good. Compounds and solutions that dropped a mosquito in it could be produced in the enormous quantities needed. If possible, something that might continue to kill, for a few hours anyway, or better, a few days after application. November 16, 1942, was the day that brought in a new insecticide sample from Switzerland. An accompanying letter gave some of the details. One feature sounded particularly interesting, if a little unbelievable. That was the claim that after a single application, the new material was given a code number and started along the testing routine. First, an elementary test against lice. A solution of the material is placed in the beaker, and the lice are added. Yes, it kills, but of course, you can't catch all the lice in the world and put them in beakers. Now to apply in powder form on the body of a volunteer. The lice are placed in a sleeve on the subject's arm. And a be found as expected, with only a few lice surviving. Now for the other slave, dusted with the powder prepared from the new material. Results: every last louse dead. A fuller test. More volunteers harboring lice wear suits of underwear dusted with the new material. Results: but how good is it against the other vicious three? The mosquito, the fly, the adaptable. Many solvent for use in solution form. Yes. Kerosene, diesel oil, even fuel and crankcase oil dissolve it easily. That's promising. It's easy to get these materials in the field, and emulsion is readily prepared with both fresh and salt water. It has shown really remarkable qualities for dispersion, and pest mosquito is excellent. Dissolved in fuel oil, a tenth of a pound per acre is enough to kill every mosquito in the area. But it's the Anopheles mosquito that carries malaria. What about that? A little stronger dosage is needed, but it's still amazingly potent. This is defined. In dust form, it has many advantages over the old standby Paris green against the malaria-carrying Anopheles. What if that information that came in the letter with it, about still killing, weeks after the first application, in a testing chamber, just a box with a glass cover, a light spray of the material in 5% emulsion was applied. Then the scientists waited 48 hours. At the end of that time, flies were put in the box. Big, healthy flies. In 5 minutes, they were in violent convulsions. In a little while, they'll all be dead. The spray was a day older. Cockroach is the next day. Sure death. And 6 days after the original spray, lice were put in. The lethal effects of the insecticide have weakened an appreciable amount. And this would not be done that has been practiced 14 months later. 1 year and 2 months after that original spray, without a drop being dead, the new insecticide was still killing thoroughly longer, from 6 to 8 times. Science had come on its greatest weapon against the insect killer. An incredible new weapon against disease. The War Department was quick to put the new substance into use in the field, under the abbreviated name DDT. But let a medical officer tell you how effective it is proved. DDT is the most powerful of the new effective ways in which all of the scientific agencies of this country have cooperated with the medical department to their own force. Because we're armed with DDT, we no longer play a type of safety. This chemical affords protection to American soldiers against the mosquitoes that carry malaria, yellow fever, dangerous from the rise, and against the ever-present flies that spread certain filth, and therefore our research collaborators continue their investigations in the laboratory and in the field. We already know the miraculous results it produced, but its full potentialities against all the insects that spread disease must be determined. I consider this amazing chemical the most valuable contribution of our wartime medical research program. It's a DDT in one of the miracles of modern medical history. This was medical shortly after the Allied occupation. Its crowded population lacked almost everything for the safeguarding of public health. Food, fuel, blankets, housing, clothing, sanitation. And refugees from all parts of Italy were swarming in. With them the loss. The perfect setup for epidemic. And then it struck. Typhus. All come. But for the damned civilian population of Naples, there seemed little hope. Winter was only arriving when typhus hit Naples. And never in history has a typhus epidemic ended before the warmth of spring. Then DDT was brought in. Dusting with DDT was begun at dwelling in the jam-packed air raid shelters were developed. Finally, 23 DDT stations were set up throughout the city, and the entire remaining population was dusted. In January, when the large-scale dusting started, the menace of the epidemic was over. DDT had won, by not only removing the lice when dusted, but by continuing to kill long after reinfestation. In the Pacific, DDT goes to war against malaria in a big way by airplane. On D-Day at Molokai, we hit both enemies at the same time, the Japs and disease. Simultaneous with the set foot on the island. The Japanese did not live long enough to enjoy the island with mosquitoes by DDT. Yes, today DDT is necessarily a military weapon. We're turning it out by the thousands of tons, but every ounce is needed for the war effort. When the fascist is finally beaten, though, DDT will be available to all. For disease around the world. And the homecoming of the healthiest army in military history will be in no small part due to DDT, our great new weapon for war today and peace tomorrow.